posted notes, so like the professors know that it's up, but the recording is like obviously more interesting for them. Yeah.
Yeah, we can post this, and let's just check in with each other. Would you guys start, and I'll listen for a little bit, and then I'll share what I've been up to.
Ian, do you want to start?
Okay. Sure. What are we starting with? Just
So
talking about our experience,
yeah,
or
your river and what you've been up to with your inquiry, and I'll talk about my engagement with Gingy and Cole and what I've been doing with my reading, etc. And Heather with her bees. Let's just tune in because we had a nice meeting last time where we made a few new tweaks about our methodology. And just correct me, it was that we were going to do our very best to not do anthropomorphism, to really aim
yeah,
at, to meet them where they are. And that we hadn't been doing any reading of the literature before, but now we were going to start to bring it in and look at some of the scholarly and popular things written about our topic, and maybe bring it onto poetics in some way with poetry or song, etc. And just let me know, did I get it? Is that what we were?
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
right to me.
yeah, I mean, I've basically just been kind of connecting with the river, still decentralizing myself, basically talking to the river, kind of floating on it, meditating. That's pretty much what I've just continued doing and had some pretty interesting experiences. A little bit outside of things to put into words, which I've put on some of my discussion posts. But definitely something has been happening, which is interesting. Kind of elaborating on other ways of knowing that I'm a little less well versed in, rather than the empirical and the scientific, which I do feel those are still very important. But yeah, so I've basically just been kind of continuing with my inquiry of trying to connect to the river, trying to understand, if there is a conscious connection that I and that or not object, but I and that being could make. Um, Again, it's something that's kind of almost subconscious in a lot of ways, the thing that I've felt or been somewhat aware of. So it's hard to kind of put that in words,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something is happening. Sometimes it's somewhat physical in its manifestation. It'll be kind of like a weird tingling, static, electric sort of feeling, which is strange. And again, it could be a psychosomatic hallucination. I don't know. But it's an interesting emergent property of doing this on a poetic engagement. I've also been digging next to a river here in my archaeological excavation that I'm part of. So that's been kind of a strange kind of coincidence, but at the same time, I still feel the same sort of kind of connection with the physicality of just being next to another river. But yeah, I mean, as far as the literature, I haven't really worked the literature into my actual experience to being with the river and trying to engage and connect. It's more of been just kind of doing mental work and just continuing with the process is really all I've been doing. So that's kind of where I'm at the moment. I know it's not super exciting, but that's kind of where I'm at with
No, I think
my
it's super
project.
exciting. I think it is super exciting. The reason being is um, all we do with this process is, right, we just kind of go through those 4 cycles of,
Right,
kind of reflect and go out there and experience. And I mean, that can be really
right,
helpful to just go through the cycles, but here we are kind of coming back and just reconnecting. I think it's whatever we find is what we find, wherever we're thinking is,
right,
I think it's really very organic in this way. And I think it's kind of cool that we're just, because if we are going to conduct an inquiry like this, and I'm not sure if I am, I was thinking I did want to bring cooperative method to my inquiry. Um, I think I was overthinking it about like how hard this work is. I'm just kind of seeing it's just like, right, engage, invoke, encounter,
right,
what do you think, feel, see, smell, taste,
right.
touch, whatever, and then go back and
Not so much
talk about,
measure, test, and communicate. And
yeah.
that's kind of the difference I guess I'm seeing. It's more of, I don't know, it kind of emerges on its own,
Mm-hmm.
which like we're in the literature, the emergent properties of onopoetics, and I'm kind of seeing that, but it's definitely very different because you're not trying to work to flesh things out. You're just sort of letting things happen, which is quite a bit different than say doing like an archaeological excavation or something scientific to where you're trying to measure things and quantify and all of that. It's kind of interesting that it's sort of self-organizing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think that there's actually an interesting intersection between like the cooperative inquiry and the panpsychism, which is this like emergent organic quality. Um, I kind of like getting to just like call each other for an hour and talk about what's been going on. And like the last time we called, I don't think any of us came in like planning to come up with a shared methodology, but like that's what happened.
Yeah.
And we just sort of like let it unfold. And I found that, I don't know, I like that process. And it's not one that I'd really used in a research capacity before. I'm used to research feeling so much more regimented that it feels sort of relaxing to get to have it be a little bit more relational, whether it be the actual research itself or the inquiry, the cooperative inquiry process here.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think it is
Yeah, I mean,
relational.
kind
I think so
of
much
like
research. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, I apologize.
oh no, it's just like I posted in one of the discussion posts a little bit ago about the different aspects of the human experience. It's kind of like using a different muscle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's kind of cool. I think that we trained our brains, or not our brains, but we trained ourselves to pay attention to only certain parts of our perception. And that could be based on Galileo and his contributions and the people who created science or critical thinking or, what to. It's almost like we treat our minds like a movie. We're cutting things and adding things and fusing things constantly, and maybe we shouldn't be cutting so many things and trying to instead view it more of as a sum of the parts rather than just focusing on all the parts individually. But that's just my own kind of
Mhm.
interpretation at the moment.
Well, I think a lot of research is, trying to get the right questions, and then what you look at is constrained by the questions, and then the research that you look at and the literature that you look at, which is not necessarily bad. Obviously, you want to look at research literature that reflects what it is you're trying to study, but I think there's something interesting that's happening about with this is it is much, I think it is a lot more of the inner, like that checking in, like you were saying, the vibration or the feelings or the senses. I was turning back to this, the book here, on cooperative inquiry on pages 49 and 50, kind of see how we're tracking. Can I share that just because I thought it might be interesting? You probably have
Sure.
already been over it a lot, but stage one, so it talks about the stages. Stage one, the first reflection phase for the inquirer is to choose the focus or topic of the inquiry and the type of inquiry, a launching statement of the inquiry topic, a plan of action for the first action phase to explore some aspect of the inquiry topic, and then a method of recording experiences during the first action phase, which we had done. And then stage two is the first action phase, when the inquirers are, then three things: exploring an experience and action, some aspect of the topic, applying an integrated range of inquiry skills, and then keeping records of the experiential data generated. And then stage three, full immersion in stage two with great openness to experience. Inquirers may break through into new awareness, lose their way, and transcend the inquiry format. Kind of cool. And
Yeah.
then stage four, this is all in the first cycle. And then stage four, the
Wow.
second reflection phase is all still that first cycle. Stage four, the second reflection phase, the inquirers share data from their action phase, which what we did in our meeting last week. And three things: review and modify the inquiry topic in the light of making sense of the data about the explored aspect of it. And we kept with our topics, but adjusted some of our approaches. Choose a plan for the second action phase to explore the same or different aspect of the topic. And three, review the method of recording the data used in the action phase, the first action phase, and then amend it for the second. And it says these four stages complete the first full cycle from reflection to action to reflection, and subsequent stages just keep round and round. Subsequent stages will continue the inquiry in a cyclic fashion with the second action phase, full immersion in it, third reflection phase, the third
Mhm.
action phase, full immersion in it, and so on. And that's it. That's it.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
then evolve. And then talks about how it evolves. So I think that's maybe where we're at now is, oh, involve, sorry. Involve from 5 to 8 full cycles
wow.
of reflection, action, reflection, action, reflection. That's it, reflection, action. with varying patterns of divergence and convergence. And then end with a major reflection phase for pulling the threads together, clarifying outcomes, and deciding whether to write a cooperative report. That's it. And so that's basically it. So I don't know, where are we at the end of the third inquiry phase, the cycle
I don't know.
fourth?
Almost seems just like a continuous metronome.
I know,
Yeah. I
Action,
think
reflection,
also
action, reflection.
oscillating.
we had some like reflection as a group and then reflection like in our small group. So this is sort of like our second reflection time, you know, like we inquired and then we came back and came up with a methodology and then went back out, and then now we're like, how did that
Right.
work? And so I
have to go
see
back
like
to the large group because I've only been just you and with the two of us, and then looking at your stuff. And at some point, I'm like, oh, I haven't shared anything. I think I've just been like so focused, like this is our little pod here. So I need to now
Right.
go expand and like share some of my knowledge and wisdom, which I've been sort of, people might wonder, where Lisa? So I'm gonna have to come back.
Sure.
yeah,
I promise to read what you wrote. I was just looking in your portfolios. So I will go look and read what you wrote in the larger groups, you guys. So please forgive me not
Cool.
knowing, but I will go look.
don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, nope, yeah, nothing. I mean, everybody's different in how they, conceptualize and connect the things. I mean, some people like it like a drip, and some people, like it with multiple. Like with me, for example, I like a bunch of different things at once because I'm so, I have the ADHD sort of mindset where I like a lot of stimuli all at once. So I usually go to the big groups. It's just where I gravitate toward. I mean,
Wow.
I don't
Okay.
think there's a right and wrong.
That's so funny because I have ADHD and I'm like, I just want my little safe, quiet place. It's
Yeah, so even within
interesting.
those,
And I did read what you wrote, Heather. Marvelous. And I did not get to respond. I don't think that maybe I put a little bit of notes in there, but I read your midterm reflection paper. And I don't know if I saw yours, Ian. Did you post yours in the
I,
portfolio?
I posted to the portfolio, but I'm having difficulty for whatever. Me and Canvas, for whatever reason, don't get along.
Yeah.
So what I did also, I posted it to our small group discussion just as a link
Oh,
or like a file you
That's
can
where
just go
I
directly to.
Yeah, that's where I could access it from.
okay.
So
I'll go look.
it's at the bottom of that. Yeah, I
Mhm.
can check in just on like where my inquiry is, and then maybe we can hear from you, Lisa, and then we can hear how like what we think of how our methodology like has been working.
That sounds great.
For my inquiry, so as you recall, it was first with the river, and then because of the ecological crisis around us, the multiple ecological crises, it became the bees. And unfortunately, because of more ecological crises, colony collapse disorder is something that happens a lot of the time, and my bee colony collapsed, which was, yeah, it's okay. I thought that I would be a lot more sad about it, actually. But I kind of feel like, this is one of the things that happens. Like, we still harvested honey, which was amazing. There's still like wax that new bees can use if we get when we get new bees next year. So, it's like, especially because the bees are a hive and not individuals, like it feels kind of like maybe this one hive was like an individual in the larger like bee species hive. So I did not know that I would handle it as well as I am, because like in this time, who needs something else bad happening?
Yeah.
But it has put a little bit of a dent in my inquiry process, because every time I try and have an inquiry, it like begins really well, and then a ecological disaster like stops me from really like deepening that relationship. So I've been reading a little bit of The Matter and Desire by Andreas Weber. The first section is actually on touch, which I think you would really like, Ian, if you haven't read it yet. His chapter 1 is about touch and rivers, and he talks about
Yeah.
a little bit of the like metaphysics and his interaction with the river. So
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I
could
have to
be
check
fun
it
for
out.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then there's a little bit about death in here, which I am now diving into to sort of like provide some like framework to sort of what I'm seeing. This work, I haven't finished it obviously, but it touches on like how do we engage with ecology in the Anthropocene, which is, I'm really just feeling like just smack in the middle of like this. There's truly like no other bigger force than like the human created like disasters. So I'm really feeling I don't know, it has been difficult to like decenter the human mind and like find this co-being with the beings, because I keep being like pulled away from them or them away from me. So since this, I have sort of like continued my beekeeper work, which is, you know, like you clean the hives, you like, there's just like a bunch of sort of like physical labor to do. And there's a little bit of maybe like interesting thought around like, can man-made things be beings, or like is there still like a relationship between like me and the hive, like the structure itself that I'm like continuing to steward for the next bees. However, I think that that's a little like heady, and I'd rather get more down into like a little more like concrete in like an actual being. So luckily for me, in my first proposal, I had 3 possible options, and now 2 are gone. So we're going for the third one, which is with my neighborhood, which is not exactly, I just said I wanted it to be more concrete. That's still like a little bit not that concrete, but it's a project that I actually started last year in another class that was about just being in relation. And in that course, I walked a specific path in my neighborhood every day. And I live in a city, but this path is on dirt roads for almost the whole time. It's like a very interesting intersection between what we think of as like nature and what we think of as like human made. And so it actually feels like a really ripe place, given that I'm sort of, I feel like at the crux of like nature and human, even though I think those are both kind of like a false dichotomy. Anyway, I've just sort of like sat with the bees and done this transition, so I haven't really gotten into like what the actual process has been like for me. But I'm interested to see what something like walking will do to our methodology, which is about like decentering the mind, which I think walking already kind of does. You have like this very physical, you can choose to focus on the physical, which I am looking forward to. And yeah, that's my update. Kind of, you know, not the best, but
No,
it's all part of a cycle.
right. And I wouldn't say it's not the best. It seems significant. I mean, if it's significant to you, it's significant to your interpretation of the world. So,
Yeah.
you know, that could be a transformative thing happening right now.
Yeah, I guess not the best, because like although I'm trying to think of things in cycles and like just like remove myself, I am still like a bit sad that it happened.
Sure.
So
Can I
yeah.
ask you a question, just because I don't really know that much about bees? What does it mean when
Yeah.
a hive collapses? I mean, do the bees just fly off and go elsewhere, or they die?
They die. It's very sad, but they don't die in the hive. So I didn't see like a million dead bees.
You know that they do. You know that
But
they
you know that they do, because they can't survive if they leave. Like there's nowhere else. And I'll write this up. I haven't had a chance to yet, but it looks like, so you can do like an autopsy of the hive. So you can go in and like see what happened, and it looks like their queen either died or they killed her, which can happen if she's being like unproductive, which can happen if they have like mites or like all these other like, they basically, the hive gets sick and they think the solution is to kill the queen. So they kill the queen and they make a new queen. And then if that queen, for, I know it's very cool, but if that
like what's
queen,
happening in America. We need a new.
no, seriously, if
We need
that
a new leader
queen
here,
for
yeah.
whatever reason doesn't make it, then the hive collapses. So they kind of like, they have one more moonshot, and they like, in this case, it didn't work. So that means that either she like wasn't able to get pregnant, so she couldn't produce more like viable bees, so the colony just collapses, or she was eaten. They do like one flight in their life, queens do, and if they get eaten by a bird, like you're done.
Oh,
That's it.
okay.
The whole hive's gone.
Okay.
So a very interesting sort of like ecological process
Yeah.
um, that I'll
Thank you.
write up, but was one that sort of happened without me knowing. Although looking back at my engagement notes, there are some clues there that I'm like, that's probably where the queen died, because like the personality of the hive changed. Um,
I could see this in a journal. I don't know if there's a journal of panpsychism or ontopoetics or something like that, but I love your journey with your bees. And I also wanted to share reading your paper when you talked about like smoke being a a being.
mhm.
Hmm. And was it also fire or was it the wind? I'm trying. There was something
It
else that
was fire, yeah, and the sun as like
the sun and the
a
sun.
co-speaker with
Whoa.
smoke, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And smoke. Yeah, smoke and the sun. I'm like, whoa, like really. I mean, somebody in our group is studying the moon. You know, the moon is her being. So
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm sort of in the I'm about to do like the synthesis of all that, but first it all just kind of happened. And so now I'm having to like dive into doing a little bit of that synthesis, and then step back and do a little bit more of the inquiry with walking in my neighborhood, which interestingly like sort of threads into this, because that's like where the bees were too. So
yeah.
it's like we're still, I feel like all of my beings have sort of like led me to the
Mm-hmm.
next one. Like, okay, like you can't be here, so go home. And when you're home, like you're with your bees. And then when your bees die, you like can go out to like where the bees were. So I'm feeling like very in the process. Although the process is taking me just it keeps taking me to different places.
Yeah.
It is fascinating, really, and honoring that. It's that's maybe that's the ontopoetics. I don't know. It's just honoring the messages, the internal pull. So mine is
Yeah.
interesting because I spent a lot of time kind of both observing my cats different ways. Like Cole turned out to be, as you could see if you read my paper, there's a little bit more Cole in there than Gingy. Um,
I noticed
he's
that.
easier. Well, he's like Mr. Mushball. Like they both come over and pursue me, um, and want contact and connection. Um, Cole is very vocal and he tends to like follow me and he's more of a love bug. Like he'll come on top of me, but Gingy does too. Um, so what occurred to me just now while we're talking, I was thinking about ontopoetics with them because I haven't, I kept thinking I'm going to wait till I feel like moved and inspired by in song because I love to sing and I do feel like songs just kind of come through me, but I haven't felt that exactly with them. And I have written some things that felt kind of a little poetic, but just talking with you guys, I'm feeling like I want to explore the feline in myself. I don't know where that came from, but the energies of catness that I'm picking up from them, maybe just associations, just with the feline and, you know, in the broader sense, but um, some of their ways of being, um, I'm thinking is evoking certain feelings in me that I want to kind of touch into, which is interesting. I've
Yeah.
kind of heard guys say they want to like, experience the feminine within them, and women feeling, experiencing like the masculine or what those energies are, whatever, and not even
Oh,
in a gendered way, but there's something feline that I respond to and relate to. So I'm
yeah.
curious to take that into my next phase. But what I've been doing is I read an article on the human cat relationship, and it was really kind of like probably some a veterinary book or journal. I just found it online, and it talked about these if you ever learned in, you know early in school, probably, I don't know what grade I learned about it, but um, about attachment that happens with ducks and geese in humans, and this sort of like attachment that happens during this sensitive period where like a baby geese. The first being that they see, they latch onto and they follow it, and that's how they learn about how to be a being. And I don't remember the name of the scientist, but who took little goslings, hatchlings, and that he was the first creature that they ever saw, and they followed him everywhere, and everybody thought that was very funny. But this idea that creatures, many creatures, called precocial creatures, which are animals that are born able to stand and walk, like when we think of like foals and there's many other little creatures, including some birds. They hatch, like mature in ways, and that in this there's a sensitive period, and it talked about socialization and connection, and I wasn't conscious about any of that when we first got these little guys as kittens, um, but it talked about social behavior, and I learned a lot that they're very social. Some animals pursue humans and want to have a relationship, and others avoid, and if they were not treated well or didn't have in that sensitive period, we're not touched. So we did a lot of holding and a lot of playing with them, and whatever that period was, they're curious, and they don't run away when human beings walk in. They want to get to know who's who and like who are the new people. Um,
Hmm.
so I learned a little bit about maybe some of the early influences of them being in our family. Um, and they really clearly there's this idea of personality. They're not persons, but they call it, personality. And I do have another book that I'm going to read next, which is more about their psychology. So I've kind of looked more about the development, and it was really interesting. And I'm seeing them a little differently now. I'm seeing them as like, wow, they're they're social connected cats, and there are some that are not at all. We know, but it's because of it's like with humans, the early attachment issues. So that was kind of cool. Um, so
Lisa, if I could comment on that, it seems like as a society we're like close to giving cats personhood because we can like give them a personality already. And I wonder, just as you were talking, I was thinking about like, why is that? Like, what's the like social cultural history of our like engagement as humans with cats that has allowed us to, I think the leap is a little bit smaller for most
yeah,
people to say that like cats have like a mind. Um,
and we don't know. That's very projecty, right? We don't.
right, yeah. But I just, as you were talking, I was just thinking about like, oh yeah, like we do kind of already have like a cat psychology. Like we think of them as having a mind. So it's in, I just, I was thinking about that as being different from maybe something like a river.
Yeah.
Um, and that maybe that how that is affecting your engagement.
Well, the fact that they're mammals, and I know that their mommies nurse them, and that they were
Well,
taken away from their mommy.
and that you can like draw on this body of like scientific literature that's already sort of saying that they do have something more than just matter. I feel like then you don't have so high of a hurdle to get over to be like, yep, they might. You can
Maybe,
already sort of be bought in
but a
right
lot
from the
of it,
start.
maybe some of it, if I looked at some of the history, it has changed over years and years and years, because there were a lot of, probably the early writings were very anthropomorphic or something. And I just heard on the radio recently, it was about dogs. A woman wrote this book about dog nature and personality, and she says almost everything we think about dogs is wrong. Like when it looks like they're smiling, they're not happy necessarily. Um, that when they go to lick people's faces, you think it's kisses and they're being affectionate. No, dogs lick each other's mouths all the time because they're curious to see if they ate something interesting, or if they're trying to get a sense of where they have been and exploring. So we may be doing a lot of interpretation. No, when a dog licks you, he's kind of saying, "Did you eat anything interesting lately?" It may not be that they're really kind of smelling us and tasting us, maybe not kissing us, but maybe. So we don't know. And so it got me thinking about that with cats, because they have such a reputation of being like, oh yeah, la ti da, that dogs get excited when we come home, and cats are like whatever. Um, but my cats are very, very, like, they will stand outside my bedroom and meow and meow and meow if we haven't come outside the room. And I'll go downstairs thinking that they wanted food, but they have plenty of food. And Gingy will like come over to me and like make noise and then run over to his food dish. He wants me to just stand there while he eats. Like he's got food, he's got water, and he wants me to be there with him, and then he eats. And I'm like, I don't know what's up with that, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I'm just still observing. But I think my next unpoetic thing is feeling whatever. Again, probably projection, but whatever the feline in myself, and then see if I move to any unpoetics. But I'll keep my reading
Yeah.
just because it is interesting. So I'm going to read
Both of you,
one article and I have another article and a book. So,
both of you guys, your papers and talking now have gotten me thinking about like like where divisions are placed or connections, and kind of giving rise to a reality based on what you divide or connect. I'm kind of wondering if there's more of a unification than what maybe we've either trained ourselves or historically or have just where we divide where Heather, where you were saying you don't know whether smoke, fire, sun, are these all separate beings. I was kind of thinking about like every human body is actually made up of more microflora, like microscopic organisms,
mhm.
than the actual what you would say is your body. However, um, without those things, your body wouldn't function correctly, or you probably wouldn't survive. And thinking about those microflora existing in your body, thinking they're separate from you, when truly that there's almost no division. So what you think is you is actually not. If you were to change the microflora, you could even change yourself. So,
Yeah.
and then the other side of that, your consciousness, when they do certain things like change the microflora and, thinking that your biomechanical processes are going to change the self, the consciousness remains the same. So there's almost the world, things seem to exist in a more of a unification than we think, but also there's things that may have more of a constant than previously thought. So I was just kind of thinking about the nature of reality may not be totally known to us, and we may have to use more of a summative perception than just trying to divide constantly and look and focus on one thing at a time and then trying to piece it together after the fact, I guess is my point.
Yeah, I think that really came through to me with bees, because I mean, it's an excellent example of the one and the many. You know, you can see a bee, but like it's one hive. Like there's no, they can't live by themselves.
Mhm.
Um,
And you can't track one bee like, oh, there's like Fluffy. Hi there. It's like probably.
right. Well, and like that one bee wouldn't exist if it wasn't fed by the other bees in the hive, and then, you know, wouldn't stay warm every night. They stay warm by like beating their wings. So like every single like moment of this bee's life, like it couldn't live without the other bees. So it's, as
Wow.
Ian was pointing, like
Wow.
it's the microflora in our bodies. Like how much are we us, or are we our microflora? Like how much is that bee a bee, or is that bee just a hive? And I really was thinking about that in terms of people too, which like, you know, I couldn't stay alive like if someone wasn't growing me my food, like someone else built this house that keeps me from having hypothermia when it's cold. And so thinking about like the interconnected nature of our matter is really what has come up. And Ian, it sounds like you're sort of also articulating like the interconnected or not, but like where those divisions are between connection and separation in consciousness
Right.
as well. If you can trouble the matter side of it, you can also trouble the consciousness side of it. Like where do you draw those lines? Do our gut flora like have a say in our consciousness?
Right. Or
What is
I kind
our
of wonder. Yeah, it seems to be paradoxical too, because maybe the divisions are there, but they're also not there. Like maybe we are individuals, but also the many at the same time. Not to totally preach a collectivist worldview, because I don't totally believe in that either. But uh, yeah, I think let's not to go down the quantum mechanics route, but the idea that an atom is an atom, but can also be in multiple places at the same time. So I mean, I think separation and summation may exist at the same time, and like different ways of knowing are different aspects of reality that we're trying to separate when truly they exist at the same time, and they're the same, like kind of the parts of the same thing, which is paradoxical, of course, but paradoxical to what? Our consciousness, maybe there's some part of the multiverse or some particle or whatnot that that's not quite that way too. I don't know, but
Well,
there's
even
something I
our
was thinking
ideas,
about.
like where do our thoughts come from? Are we thinking, these are not completely novel ideas, or expanding on the ideas of others, or for
Hmm.
some people, it's parroting the ideas of others or putting our own spin on things. I mean, it's all um, there's a lot of that's also another invisible aspect of our commonality is
Hmm.
concepts, and so. Wow. Well, let's see. So, do we have anything from what we've shared so far? And Anne, do you have more you want to share about your river? Fill us in terms of if there is a new methodology or anything that Heather,
Um,
you did a beautiful job last time of kind of um, synthesizing what you heard around this group for us to take into our next wave of inquiry. So,
yeah, I mean, the river, I've you know, kind of did the decentralizing. I kept my physical slash, you know, the mechanics of my methodology are quite similar. Um, However, I've been, obviously I do a lot of scientific stuff also, but uh, I was thinking about superposition being on the river, which was strange, and
what
then
is that?
about so basically, like superposition in general is just basically kind of existing on top of other things, basically, in the most basic way to put it. Like, for example, saying that a person is a superposition of like atoms and cells and other biology is like we kind of exist on the top of this pyramid, which is holding us up of all these different things happening. It's again not the most scientific way to put something like that, but that's kind of the best way I can think of to explain it. Um, but thinking about like, for example, like the butterfly effect, things are seen to be separated, yet things that are quote unquote separated via science or some other definitions somehow act on each other. For example, like double slit theory, your perception and observing, a particle influences the particle's actions, yet your perception is supposedly something that's non-tangible and not really in reality.
Yeah.
But seeing perception as an illusion is paradoxical also because you have to have awareness for an illusion to take place. Because without conscious awareness, there is no illusion because there's nothing to elude.
Oh,
So it's kind of a crazy rabbit hole. But so yeah, I was thinking about that and then ideas of separate versus non. And um, I was reading a physics paper about there's these strange webs in the universe that physicists are looking at that things that aren't totally connected or not causal, but they're somehow acting on each other, basically defying determinism, uh, is pretty interesting. So I'm thinking, like that's what I'm kind of looking at science, but onto poetics, not really scientific. So I'm looking, kind of that realm of thinking, which I'd almost say it borderlines on like some parts of it seem almost like mysticism. That's not to say it's not valid, but I think those ways of knowing could be just as important as trying to reduce and quantify everything into empirical evidence, but not to disregard the empirical because I mean you disregard the empirical, then you could just say whatever, and it may or may not land. So I don't know. That's kind of where I've been led so far. If
okay.
that makes any sense at all.
Well, let's hear. You know what? I think it all makes sense because it's all what we're, curious about.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm hearing from as I'm taking notes because that's how I like pay attention. So I'm like looking back at what we've said. That Ian, you've sort of hit on something that I think both Lisa Joy and myself have also said. That is maybe in our next round of inquiry. I don't know if it's a full round, but the next time that we like sit with our beings, something that we all have said and that we can sort of like hold and consider is like where these separations are between us and our beings physically, like with our matter, but also with our minds.
Mhm.
So like just thinking about the separation or summation, Ian, that you just said, like where do we fuse and where do we come apart from ourselves, our matter, what is our, like when I say my consciousness, like what is that? And then if we're in this engagement with a being, like that same thing, what is my consciousness? What is that being's consciousness? My matter, that being's matter, and like where might those things intersect or be separate in ways that are unexpected to our daily like engagements, you know, like outside of the visual, which I think is what we often base our separations on, is like, my hand looks different than this computer, so it's really different. But, you know, you're seeing my hand through the computer, so how different really is it? Yeah, so aside from that computer thing, yeah, thinking about like separateness, boundaries, and connections as we go forward seems like something that all three of us sort of like have been surfacing.
Well, you mentioned, you know, in the Weber book, touch, about death. Maybe, I don't know, could it be interesting? Maybe we choose the same ones in here and reflect on them, or each choose a different one or something. I don't know. It could be interesting to choose, at least from our perspective, like touch. All of us will have touch in some way. Like I'm petting and holding, and my kitties and purr. So anyway, I know it does talk about a river, but that could be interesting. Ooh, page 37.
Yeah, I
It's
touch the river with my hands.
and there's one in Desire, and the one on Desire says, "We're not individuals, we're colonies."
So we can do like, because this round we can like pick our own reading.
Yeah.
So maybe we each like pick something from the Matter and Desire book, and then the next time we meet, we can see how it's interacted with what we've done in our inquiry.
That sounds cool.
Ian, does that work for you?
So are we picking something from the book that you're speaking of right now, or just our own books? So I'm just making sure.
I think if it, well, whatever you want, but offering to have us all do the same book so that we're talking from the same text, which might make the conversation happen easier. But if there's something you really want to read, you can read that too.
No, that's fine. So we're just doing the Weber book then?
That would work for me. And then, you know, if there's something else that calls to you, especially in engagements with the wider group.
Yeah, no, that's fine with me. I like the Weber book. I've read parts of it already, so I can continue.
All right, so maybe we could each choose whatever. Hey, why don't we just dive in and we'll see if we each choose the same thing. That would be interesting, and if we end up with something different, I'm kind of drawn to the one on sharing, which is near the end of the book. The one on touch is interesting to me. You know, it's a lovely book, and race, there's transformation, death. Like, okay, I'll just say, you know what, it just occurred to me. So my cats are 14 and a half, almost 15. I don't know how long cats live. I know some cats can live to 18 or 20 something years old. But one of them, so Gingy, we give medication, and he's gotten very, very skinny. And so he's been taking some kind of steroid for over the course of the last year, just a little bit less and then a little more. And I do think about his death. He got sick on this one day. He looked really weird, and we woke up the next morning thinking he might not be alive or whatever. And he was fine. He was running around doing himself. But I don't know. So I guess we can decide if we want to just each do our own thing, or want to maybe choose one area, because the death one does actually interest me too. So
I think touch would be the easiest for the being that I'm doing, just because sharing is, again, it's hard to define sharing or death with a river. I don't know how that, maybe that rivers die. I don't know, but I know that I can touch the river, so I do that, when I'm in a kayak usually.
We could all read touch, and if another chapter calls to us, another chapter, because I think touch aligns really closely with the methodology that we came to. So it would be really interesting to like put that onto the framework that Weber provides in that chapter.
And it's also it's kind of the early, right? It's right after, is it the first, like the first
It's at
chapter?
The beginning. Yeah. So the other stuff will like
one.
thread from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. So when we're engaging with our beings, thinking about boundaries, separation, and connections, and then reading chapter 1 and other chapters if we want of Weber.
Yeah, I think
Cool. We'll
that
reflect
works.
on that
Yeah,
in our little next thing. And
Cool. Yeah.
can we
sounds
just
good.
check on the syllabus? What's our next big assignment? Do we have a group project or something? Let's see what's coming up.
I think it's just the final paper in December.
Yeah.
That's
That's
it.
what I remember, because it's basically, it seems to be participation in the two
Yeah.
papers, and that's it.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
This week we're supposed to be writing about, oh gosh, I'm late. Taoist and Chan perspectives. I didn't do it yet. So did you guys already do that? Write about the
Um,
Taoist
I
Uh, no,
didn't.
I didn't
existence?
think there was a formal assignment.
Well, it
Yeah,
says
I've been
October
basing off of
26th through November 1st. It just
I've
says,
been basing off of the modules, which the intros say like from the syllabus, read what works for you.
okay.
Yeah, because that, like, I read some of the things in the syllabus, but yeah, I don't think there. I think that, like what you're saying, Heather, it's a jumping off point for the discussions.
Yeah.
Because I
Okay.
just read a discussion about dualism versus non-dualism, which is basically, Taoist is not dualism at all. It's kind of just letting whatever happens happen and not resisting it. But,
I haven't read it yet, but I did start, and it is very different and interesting. You're talking about
mm-hmm.
calligraphy and poetry and pottery, and it's like, ooh,
Taoism's really wild. It's,
very interesting. Yeah, so
mm-hmm.
non-dualistic, this body of non-dualistic assumptions. Okay, so well,
Mm-hmm.
all right, maybe I'll take a look. So yeah, so
Yeah, I think so what we are all doing is sort of I'm seeing it as a little bit separate from those like big group discussions where that will be like, the reading that comes from the syllabus, and then some of the reading that we do you obviously can post about in the big group, but will be like more specific to this small group.
okay,
Although I'm sure like we all three can still post in the panpsychism discussion post, and people will be like, wow, they're really having a great conversation, and we'll be like, yes.
now
We
something
planned
I
this.
haven't been on there in a little bit. Have you guys posted anything about each other's papers? Did you like reflect
So
on mine or anything or?
no, I'm mostly hoping to do our engagement with each other, with you two here in the Zoom
Yeah,
format.
okay,
Yeah.
And then I'm posting like reflections on the readings or on other people's posts in like the module
got it.
posts. Yeah.
So I would love any responses or thoughts on my inquiry, and I don't know if you, on my paper, if you need to look at it again, we can do
Okay.
that. I'm just
You would like typed in there works for you?
typed or spoken, whatever you
Okay.
want. I just was so curious to hear, your thoughts about it.
Okay. I can go through and just like add some comments. I
Yeah.
had them when I was reading through it, but I haven't read through it in about a week. So I'll go through and get you.
And I'll do the same for you guys.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's been a few
After
days.
this
It was
crazy
a good
week,
paper, though. I will say that from what I remember, and the way you're trying to engage with each individual cat was, you know, pretty in depth. I'd say you're following the cycle of kind of the structure of how to do ontopoetics pretty to the letter from your
Mhm.
paper, which is great. Mine's a little less to the letter of how I guess it's supposed to work. I'm doing air quotations.
oh,
Um, but yeah, I
I want to
definitely
see
like
your
the
face,
players.
Ian.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. My computer has no camera, and I'm actually remote still on the Stig site, which I will
Okay.
be the entire time we're in this class, which is kind of crazy. But I mean, after this, I go straight into comp, so it's a little scary.
What is your
This is
program?
I'm in the PhD program for transformative studies. I think we're in the same one.
Yeah, but you're in a
Uh, yeah, this is actually my last class before
uh,
comp, and then I go from there into my dissertation. So I'm, just moving along, but yeah, it's good, but it's kind of like jumping off a waterfall. So it's like class, and then you jump off into comps. I did ecology of ideas, which is the other like big thing, and that was, I'll tell you now, that one's kind of tough. So
yeah, that's
you
the
can do it.
literature review class. I'm taking that next year. Can you guys,
Yeah,
I don't think I have your contact information, like phone numbers. Could you put them in the chat or just tell me? Because
Yeah.
unless I can stop the recording, I would love to be able to be in touch. That way is faster for me than emailing through
yeah.
through the canvas. Well, this was wonderful.
I'll,
I'm going to stop the
yeah,
recording.